Hello 4B, this is your Tuesday English video. Hope you're all well. Had a good night's sleep, ready and raring to go for another day of home lessons. I'm really starting to miss you guys. I'm really looking forward to get back into school. Hopefully you'll be able to tell me everything you've been up to whilst you've been at home. It's been much quieter since I've been at home without you guys making such a racket in the classroom, but I really am missing you, so I'm looking forward to seeing you. So yesterday we did some work all about the Trunchbull. The work I received on the 4B email was amazing. The adjectives and the similes that you managed to use were brilliant. I think you almost liked her as much as I did. Now, I made a bold statement yesterday and said that my favourite Roald Dahl character was the Trunchbull. And I've started preparing for today's lesson, and I think I may have made a bit too much of a statement yesterday about that. I started looking at the story that we're looking at today and realised how much I love it and how much I love this character. We're moving on from malevolent characters and we're going to think about a heroic character today. We're going to be thinking about the BFG. So this is now potentially my most favourite Roald Dahl book, but we'll have to make up our minds towards the end. We're going to be describing him as a heroic character, thinking about what he does that's different to a malevolent character and how he is as a character. If you've read this, you'll know that even though he is a giant, he is a very friendly giant, a very calm and caring and kind giant, not like the others in the story. So I'm going to read you a couple of different sections today from the story, and I'm going to ask you again, like we have done for the last few lessons, to write down any adjectives or any similes or any other vocabulary really that you think is really good to help describe the BFG. So hopefully everyone's got a pencil in front of them and a piece of paper so they're ready to make some notes. Having a look at the pictures, we might be able to describe him based on what he looks like from the pictures. I can see that he's got very large ears and he's got green trousers on. He looks incredibly tall, especially in this picture where Sophie's on the table. He looks huge. He's got an old looking face, enormous ears, like we've already said. Huge hands, the way he's holding her in his hands. I can see he's wearing a brown waistcoat. But let's have a read and see what else we can learn about him. So I'm going to read from the end of the chapter, which is called The Cave, and then I'm going to read a couple of sections from the chapter, The BFG. So if you've got a copy of this, you might want to have a look at the same time. The giant took off his black coat, important, and hung it against the wall. Sophie saw that under the cloak he was wearing a sort of collarless shirt. You can see that in the picture actually if you look. The shirt's not got a collar on it. And a dirty old leather waistcoat. Leather? Hadn't thought of that. Hadn't thought of dirty either. That didn't seem to have any buttons. His trousers were faded green and were far too short in the legs. Yeah, you can see that from that picture next to my face, can't you? Where his trousers don't quite meet the tops of his shoes. They look a little bit short. He has got long legs though, so it must be hard to find trousers to fit him. On his bare feet, he was wearing a pair of ridiculous sandals. I quite like the idea of that because they must be like boats. That for some reason had holes cut along each side with a large hole at the end where his toes stuck out. Sophie, crouching on the floor of the cave in her nightie, gazed at him through her thick steel-rimmed glasses. She was trembling like a leaf in the wind. Oh, I love that. It's not really a description of the BFG, but it's a really nice simile. I wonder if you could kind of write your description from Sophie's point of view and try and incorporate that one. I'm going to read it again one more time. She was trembling like a leaf in the wind. I love that. And a finger of ice was running up and down the length of her spine. That's quite nice too, isn't it? She's got that tingly, icy feeling running all the way down her spine because of seeing this huge giant. Ha! Shouted the giant, walking forward and rubbing his hands together. What has us got here? His booming voice rolled around the walls of the cave like a burst of thunder. Ooh, loads of great words there. Booming voice and his voice rolling around the walls of the cave like a burst of thunder. I love the burst of thunder, but I really like the rolling around the cave. That's got to be the echo, hasn't it? The sound bouncing back off the cave constantly. Maybe we might hear that, ha, what have we got here then, several times in an echo. I really like that. Echo's a tricky one to spell, E-C-H-O for echo, but to see that in your work would be really lovely. At the start of the next chapter that I was going to read to you, we kind of get more dialogue from the BFG. I'm going to put out a warning here. The BFG speaks a bit strangely, and I'm going to give my best go at the BFG speaking, but please forgive me if I'm not able to do the words completely correctly, especially if you're reading along because you've got the book with you. I would give it my best shot. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. Now he really is going to eat me, Sophie thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears. Love that. Truly enormous ears. Look at that picture. He definitely has truly enormous ears. Each one was as big as the wheel of a truck. Oh, simile. Lovely. Write that one down. And he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished, kind of like independently of each other. We can't do that, can we? I can only really think about elephants that can move their ears in that way. That could be used for a simile, couldn't it? He moved his ears like an elephant, which would be quite nice. I'm going to read that bit about his ears one more time, just in case you didn't write it down. Each one was as big as the wheel of a truck, and he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished. Bit like an elephant. I is hungry, the giant boomed. He grinned, showing massive square teeth. Huge square teeth. Write that down too. Square teeth. The teeth were very white and very square. Two good pieces of information there. White and square. This is a great bit coming up here now. And they sat in his mouth like huge slices of white bread. Well, my teeth aren't that big. Bread is quite big. His teeth must be enormous. His teeth are like huge slices of white bread. Love that. Write that one down if you've not done that already. Papa, please don't eat me, Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. Just because I is a giant, you think I is a man gobbling cannibal, he shouted. You is about right. Giant is all cannibal and murderful, and they does gobble up human beings. We is in giant country now. Giants is everywhere around. Out there us has the famous bone-crunching giant. Bone-crunching giant crunches up 2 wopsy-whiffling human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear-bursting. Noise of crunchy bones goes crickety-crack for miles around. Ouch, Sophie said. Bone-crunching giant only gobbles human beings from Turkey, the giant said. Every night Bone Cruncher is gobbling off to Turkey to gobble Turks. Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. Why Turks? She blurted out. What's wrong with the English? Bone-crunching giant says Turks is tasting ever so much juicier and more scrum-diddly-umptious. Bone Cruncher says Turkish human beings has a glamourly flavour. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of Turkey. I suppose they would, Sophie said. Of course they would, the giant shouted. Every human being is diddly different. Some is scrum-diddly-umptious and some is ucky slush. Greeks is all full of ucky slush. No giant is eating Greeks ever. Why not? Sophie said. Greeks from Greece is tasting all greasy, the giant said. I imagine that is possible too, Sophie said. She was wondering with a bit of a tremble what all this talking about eating people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she must simply play along with this peculiar giant and smile at his jokes. So, I think we've learned quite a bit about the BFG there. Not about him personally, but about the way that he talks, about the way that he behaves. He's talking about these other giants who are eating human beings, or beings, sorry, I'm turning into the BFG there. And he is using different vocabulary. His language structure is very peculiar, but he seems quite animated and excited and friendly. He wants to share that information with Sophie, doesn't he? He seems like a genuinely interesting person. So I've got the picture here in my book, which is exactly the same as what you've got on the slide there, but not coloured. But the BFG continues to talk for quite a long time in this chapter about where people come from and what they taste like and things like that. And I'm not going to continue to read that because it doesn't really give us much more information about him that we've already got. Until right at the end, where Sophie says, "What sort of human beings do you eat?" she asked, trembling. "Me?" shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars rattle on their shelves. "Me gobbling up human beings? This I never. The others, yes. All the others is gobbling them up every night, but not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice and jumbly giant. I is the only nice and jumbly giant in giant country. I is the big friendly giant. I is the BFG. What is your name?" "My name is Sophie," Sophie said, hardly daring to believe the good news that she had just heard. So I do think that he could be one of my favourite Roald Dahl characters. I love the way he speaks. I love the words that he uses. I love how he thinks that everybody else speaks like that, which is just quite beautiful, really. So today I'm going to ask you to describe the big friendly giant. At the top of my slide here, I've written down lots of the lovely vocabulary that we've just met whilst we were reading. I've got there about his black coat, his collarless shirt, his bare feet, his ridiculous sandals, his booming voice like a burst of thunder, his enormous ears as big as the wheel of a truck, his white teeth like huge slices of bread. But I also know you guys will come up with your own description too, and not just use Roald Dahl's words. You might, like me, want to put in something along the lines of the ears moving just like an elephant. I haven't written that down on here. I think I almost need to edit my work and put that in. I then started to write a description. It's up to you how you want to write it. If you want to challenge yourself, you might want to write it as if you are Sophie and what you are seeing. So you could write it in the first person using I, as if I was Sophie. I can see this. But just like yesterday, I want you to try and link your sentences together. So it's not a list of I can see this, I can see this, I can see this. Instead, I want you to try and vary your sentence starters and link them together. The writing I've done isn't from Sophie's perspective. I didn't think of that really, but I am going to read it to you. The big friendly giant is a gentle giant. Although he looks huge and terrifying, he is in fact kind and calm. He wears a black coat, collarless shirt, and faded green trousers that are too short for him. His voice booms loudly like thunder, and his ears are as big as... And I've left it. I could put in wheel of a truck, but I could now try and think of a different simile to change it up and put my own creative spin on it. What could I say his ears were as big as? Wheel of a truck? Elephant's ears? An elephant, maybe? All sorts of things I could put into it. So your task today, 4B, is for you to have a go at writing your own description of the BFG using all those wonderful adjectives and similes that I know that you can use. I would recommend pausing the video here so that you can have a look at these words again whilst you're writing, so that if you want to magpie them, you can do. But obviously, don't steal all my writing. I want to see your writing too. So good luck, 4B. I know you'll do really well with this, and I can't wait to have my inbox filled with emails from you guys showing me what you've done. Okay, good luck, guys.